The first gunshot crackled through the evening air like lightning splitting an oak, drawing every eye in Redemption Creek to the dusty Main Street where Josephine Fletcher stood defiant, her dress torn and her chains gleaming in the fading sunlight of 1876. Blood trickled down her temple from where the town marshal had struck her, but her green eyes burned with a fury that made even the hardened men of the frontier town take a step back. "She's a murderer," shouted Marshal Dawson, his badge catching the last rays of the setting sun. "This woman belongs in chains until the judge arrives next month." From the edge of the crowd, a tall figure stepped forward. Rugged and sun-weathered, with eyes the color of a summer storm, Rhett Morgan moved with the easy confidence of a man who'd faced death too many times to fear it. His gun belt hung low on his hips, and the duster he wore had seen better days, but there was something in his stance that commanded respect. "She belongs beside me," Rhett's voice carried across the suddenly silent street, "and any man who says different can answer to this." His hand hovered near his halspin. Josephine's eyes widened in surprise. She'd never seen this cowboy before in her life, yet here he was, standing between her and a hanging. Marshal Dawson scoffed. "Morgan, you're new to these parts. You don't know what this woman's done." "I know an innocent woman when I see one," Rhett replied, taking another step forward. "And I know a corrupted lawman when I smell one." Whispers rippled through the crowd. No one challenged Marshal Dawson, not if they wanted to keep breathing. "The stagecoach was robbed 3 days ago," Dawson snapped. "2 men dead. We found her with the money." "Found me after your men planted it in my saddlebag," Josephine called out, her voice stronger than her battered appearance suggested. "You know I didn't kill anyone, Dawson." "You know exactly who did." Rhett's eyes never left the marshal. "Remove those chains, or I'll remove them myself along with that badge you're disgracing." The tension stretched between them like a bowstring pulled too tight. Josephine could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. This stranger, this cowboy with storm cloud eyes, was risking his life for her, and she couldn't understand why. "You willing to die for a woman you've never met, Morgan?" Dawson asked, his hand inching toward his gun. Rhett's smile was cold. "Are you willing to die for a lie?" The air around them seemed to still, as if the very town held its breath. Then, from the saloon doorway, another voice broke the tension. "Marshal, might be best to let this one go." It was Samuel Green, the town banker, his fine suit and pocket watch marking him as a man of means. "We don't need bloodshed in the street. The judge can sort this out." Dawson's face twisted with barely contained rage, but after a long moment he motioned to his deputy. "Fine, release her, but she doesn't leave town and she's your responsibility, Morgan. Anything happens, it's on your head." As the chains fell away from her wrists, Josephine rubbed the raw skin beneath. She studied the cowboy who had just saved her from weeks in a cell or worse, from a hasty rope justice that was all too common in frontier towns. "Why?" she asked simply when Rhett approached her. "Because they're wrong," he answered, offering her his arm with a gentleness that belied his dangerous appearance. "And we both know it." Josephine hesitated only a moment before taking his arm. Whatever game this stranger was playing, it had to be better than what awaited her in Dawson's jail. "Miss Fletcher, I suggest you come with me," Rhett said loud enough for others to hear. "My sister's boarding house has a room where you can rest and clean up." "Sister," Josephine wondered but played along. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan." As they walked away from the crowd, she felt the marshal's eyes burning into her back like hot brands. Whatever reprieve this cowboy had bought her wouldn't last long. Dawson wasn't a man to let go of his prey so easily. "I don't have a sister," Rhett murmured as they turned the corner. "But I do have a room at the Frontier Hotel where you'll be safe for tonight." "Why help me?" Josephine asked again, her voice lower now. "You don't know me, you don't know what I've done." Rhett stopped walking and looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "I know Dawson, I know his kind. And I know that no woman deserves to be chained in the street like an animal." He paused. "Besides, I've been watching this town for 3 days. The stagecoach robbery happened while you were playing piano at the Silverbuck Saloon. Hard to be in 2 places at once." Josephine stared at him in shock. "You've been watching me." "I've been watching everyone," he corrected. I'm looking for someone and my search brought me to Redemption Creek. Finding you in chains was unexpected. As they reached the hotel, Josephine realized this strange cowboy might be her only chance at survival in a town that had already decided her guilt. What she didn't realize was that by morning, her fate would be irrevocably tied to his, and that the road ahead would lead them both into dangers and emotions neither had ever anticipated. The Frontier Hotel was a far cry from the elegant establishments Josephine had known in St. Louis, but its wooden floors were swept clean, and the proprietress, a no-nonsense widow named Mrs. Brewster, gave Rhett a respectful nod as they entered. "Room's ready, Mr. Morgan," she said, her sharp eyes taking in Josephine's disheveled appearance without comment. "Sent up hot water like you asked." "Much obliged, Mrs. Brewster." Rhett tipped his hat. "The lady will be staying with us for a while." "Your business is your own," the widow replied, though her raised eyebrow suggested otherwise. "Just keep the peace under my roof." Rhett led Josephine up a narrow staircase to a room at the end of the hallway. It was simple but clean: a bed with a quilt, a washstand with a steaming pitcher of water, a small writing desk by the window. "You'll stay here," he said, remaining in the doorway. "I've got the room next door." "Lock your door at night." Josephine turned to face him, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. "Mr. Morgan, I appreciate your help, but I need to understand why you're doing this. Men don't generally assist strange women without expecting something in return." A flash of something, perhaps offense, crossed his features before settling back into that unreadable mask. "I'm not men, Miss Fletcher. I'm just a man with his own reasons for being in Redemption Creek. Your situation with Dawson complicates things, but I couldn't stand by and watch an injustice." "The marshal will come for me again," she said, moving to the window where she could see the darkening street below. "He's determined to see me hang for those murders." "Why?" Rhett asked, still not entering the room. "What's his interest in framing you specifically?" Josephine sighed, pushing a strand of auburn hair from her face. "I came to Redemption Creek 3 months ago to find my brother, James. He wrote to me about striking it rich in the silver mines nearby, but when I arrived, he was gone. The last person to see him was Dawson." "And you started asking questions," Rhett concluded. She nodded. "Too many questions, apparently. Then I found something, a letter in my brother's handwriting mentioning a partnership gone wrong, a partner who threatened him. The next day, my boarding house room was ransacked and the letter disappeared. And this partner was, I don't know for certain. James only mentioned a powerful man who would stop at nothing. 3 days later, the stagecoach was robbed, 2 men killed, and suddenly Dawson's men found the money in my saddlebag." She turned back to him, her eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. "Convenient, isn't it?" Rhett's jaw tightened. "Get some rest, Miss Fletcher. We'll talk more in the morning." As he turned to leave, Josephine called after him. "Mr. Morgan, who are you looking for in Redemption Creek?" He paused, his hand on the doorframe. "A ghost from my past, someone who needs to answer for what they've done." Without elaborating further, he closed the door behind him. Alone, Josephine moved to the washstand and began cleaning the dirt and blood from her face. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman she barely recognized, thinner, harder, with shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there when she'd left St. Louis in search of her brother. She had come west as a music teacher turned saloon pianist, following the only family she had left. Now she was an accused murderer, saved from jail by a mysterious cowboy with secrets of his own. As she sank onto the bed, the enormity of her situation washed over her, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to cry quiet, shuddering sobs that wouldn't carry through the thin walls to the man next door. What Josephine didn't know was that Rhett Morgan sat on his own bed, a worn photograph in his calloused hands and a loaded revolver at his side, listening to her muffled sobs and wondering if saving her had just complicated the vengeance he'd spent 3 years pursuing. Morning arrived with the sounds of Redemption Creek stirring to life, wagon wheels on dirt roads, horses nickering at hitching posts, the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer. Josephine woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. A soft knock at her door made her sit up quickly. Miss Fletcher, it's Rhett Morgan." She smoothed her wrinkled dress as best she could before opening the door. Rhett stood there, already dressed for the day in a clean shirt and denim pants, his gun belt securely fastened. He held a bundle in his arms. "Mrs. Brewster sent these up for you," he said, handing her the package. "Said a lady of your stature shouldn't be wearing yesterday's troubles." Inside the bundle, Josephine found a simple but clean dress, undergarments, and even a hairbrush. "This is very kind," she said, genuinely touched by the unexpected generosity. The widow's got a soft spot for those in trouble, though she'd never admit it. Rhett glanced down the hallway. "I'll wait while you change. We need to talk, and it's best not to do it here." 20 minutes later, feeling more human in clean clothes with her hair neatly arranged, Josephine followed Rhett down the back stairs of the hotel and through an alley that led away from the main street. She noticed he kept one hand near his gun, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. "Where are we going?" she asked as they skirted the edge of town. "Somewhere we can speak freely," he replied. "Dawson has ears everywhere in town." They followed a narrow path that led to a small creek, the waterway that had given the town its name. A cluster of cottonwood trees provided shade and privacy, and Rhett finally stopped, seemingly satisfied they were alone. "I need to know everything about your brother and what he was involved in," he said without preamble. "And I need the truth, Miss Fletcher, all of it." Josephine bristled at his tone. "I've told you the truth. James came west after the war like thousands of other men. He wrote about finding silver, about making enough money to bring me out here too." "And what was James Fletcher before the war?" Rhett pressed. She hesitated. "A banker in St. Louis. He lost everything during the war. Our parents died, the bank failed, and he came west to start over." Rhett's eyes narrowed slightly. "Did he ever mention the name Clayton Hargrove?" The name hit Josephine like a physical blow. "How do you know that name?" Answer the question. Her hands trembled slightly. "Hargrove was James's business partner in St. Louis. They had a falling out before James left." "Why? What does Hargrove have to do with any of this?" Rhett's expression darkened. "Clayton Hargrove is the man I've been tracking for 3 years. He's here in Redemption Creek, only now he calls himself Samuel Green." "The banker?" Josephine's eyes widened in shock. "But that's impossible. Hargrove was a small, thin man with spectacles, and people change their appearances when they're running from their pasts," Rhett cut in. "Especially when those pasts include theft, fraud, and murder." Josephine shook her head in disbelief. "Samuel Green is one of the most respected men in town. He helped me get the piano position at the Silverbuck when I first arrived." "Of course he did," Rhett said grimly. "He needed to keep you close, figure out what you knew. When you started asking too many questions about your brother, he decided you'd become a liability. You think Green Hargrove is behind the stagecoach robbery, that he framed me." The pieces were starting to fit together in her mind, a terrible puzzle taking shape. "I think your brother discovered something about Hargrove that put him in danger, and I think Hargrove eliminated that danger, just like he's trying to eliminate you." Rhett's voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes burned with an intensity that sent a chill down Josephine's spine. "How do you know so much about Clayton Hargrove?" she asked quietly. For a long moment, Rhett was silent, his gaze fixed on the flowing creek. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, rower, filled with a pain he clearly kept carefully controlled. 3 years ago, I had a wife named Rebecca and a daughter named Emma. We had a small ranch outside of Denver. Times were hard, but we were making it." He took a deep breath. "A man calling himself Edward Smith came to town, opened a small bank, convinced half the county to invest their savings with him. Promised returns no honest banker could deliver." Josephine felt her stomach twist, already guessing where this story was headed. "When the bank collapsed, people lost everything. My wife had put our savings there without telling me. She wanted to surprise me, buy more cattle to expand our herd." Rhett's jaw clenched. "Smith disappeared in the night with all the money. 12 people killed themselves in the aftermath. Others, like my Rebecca, got sick from the stress and despair. Pneumonia took her within a month." "And your daughter?" Josephine asked softly, "without money for a doctor." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I tracked Smith to Kansas, only to find he'd done the same thing there under the name William Peters. Then to Missouri as Thomas Grant. Each time he ruins lives and disappears. Clayton Hargrove, Edward Smith, William Peters, Thomas Grant, and now Samuel Green, all the same man. Josephine struggled to reconcile the charming, distinguished banker who had welcomed her to Redemption Creek with the monster Rhett described. If what you're saying is true, then my brother is probably dead, Rhett finished for her, his bluntness softened only slightly by the genuine sympathy in his eyes. I'm sorry, Miss Fletcher, men like Hargrove don't leave loose ends. Tears stung her eyes, but Josephine fought them back. Then why am I still alive? Why frame me instead of just disposing of me like he apparently did with James? Because killing a woman raises too many questions, even in a frontier town. Better to let the law hang you properly. Rhett's expression hardened. But now I've complicated his plan by interfering. Which means we're both in danger, Josephine concluded. What do we do now? Rhett's hand moved to his gun, checking it automatically. We find proof of who Green really is, proof of what happened to your brother, and proof of who really robbed that stagecoach. And then. The look that crossed Rhett's face was so cold and determined that Josephine almost took a step back. Then I finish what I started 3 years ago. As they made their way back toward town, taking a different route to avoid being seen, Josephine considered the man walking beside her. He had saved her from jail, possibly from death, yet his own mission was clearly one of vengeance. Was she trading one dangerous situation for another? Mr. Morgan, she said as they approached the edge of town, if Samuel Green is as dangerous as you say, confronting him directly would be suicide. I'm not planning on confronting him yet, Rhett replied. First, we need to clear your name. That means finding out who really robbed that stagecoach. And how do you propose we do that? A hint of a smile touched Rhett's lips. By starting with the most obvious place, the scene of the crime. The stagecoach robbery had occurred in a narrow pass about 5 miles outside of town, a perfect spot for an ambush, with high rocks on either side and a sharp bend in the road that forced drivers to slow down. Getting there without being noticed would be the first challenge. Dawson will have men watching for you, Rhett said as they slipped into the livery stable through a back door. We'll need to be careful. The stable boy, a freckle-faced kid of about 15, looked up in surprise as they entered. Mr. Morgan and Miss Fletcher. His eyes widened in recognition. Jacob, Rhett greeted him with a nod. I need 2 horses quietly, and I need you to forget you saw either of us. The boy hesitated. Marshal Dawson came by earlier, said to tell him if anyone was asking after Miss Fletcher. Did he now? Rhett reached into his pocket and pulled out a silver dollar, flipping it to the boy who caught it reflexively. That's for your silence for the next hour. By then we'll be long gone. Jacob looked at the coin, then at Josephine. They're saying you killed those men on the stage, madam. That true? Josephine met his gaze steadily. No, Jacob, it's not. Someone wants people to think I did, though. The boy studied her for a moment, then nodded. My pa always said you can tell a killer by their eyes. Yours don't look like a killer's to me. He pocketed the coin. Take the bay mare and the dun gelding. They're fastest. I'll tell folks I'm grooming them if anyone asks. As they saddled the horses, Josephine couldn't help but notice how capable Rhett's hands were, strong but gentle with the animals, efficient in their movements. The hands of a man who had spent his life working with horses and cattle. You said you had a ranch, she said quietly as she adjusted her stirrups. Do you still have it? Rhett shook his head. Sold it to pay for doctors who couldn't save my daughter and to fund my search for Smith. Nothing left to go back to now. The matter-of-fact way he spoke of such profound loss struck Josephine deeply. This man had lost everything: his family, his home, his former life, yet here he was, risking what little he had left to help a woman he barely knew. I'm sorry, she said simply. He glanced at her, something softening briefly in his eyes. So am I. They led the horses out the back of the stable and mounted up once they were clear of town, taking a circuitous route through a stand of trees to avoid being seen from the main road. Josephine rode well. Rhett noted with approval another surprise from this woman who continued to defy his expectations. I grew up riding, she explained when she caught his appraising look. My father believed a proper lady should be as comfortable in a saddle as in a parlor. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was, a shadow crossed her face, until the war took everything from us. They rode in companionable silence after that, each lost in memories of what had been lost. The day was clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn weather that made the rolling hills and distant mountains seem like a painting come to life. In another time, under different circumstances, it might have been a pleasant ride. But as they approached the pass where the stagecoach had been attacked, the mood darkened. Rhett dismounted first, tying his horse to a scrubby pine tree. "Stay alert," he warned Josephine as he helped her down from her mount. Whoever did this might return to make sure they didn't leave anything behind. The scene of the robbery was still marked by evidence of violence, dark stains on the dirt road that could only be blood, scattered papers from ransacked luggage. A broken wheel spoke. Rhett moved methodically through the area, his eyes scanning the ground for anything the sheriff's men might have missed. Josephine followed more hesitantly, trying not to look at the bloodstains. "What exactly are we looking for?" "Anything that doesn't fit," Rhett replied, kneeling to examine something in the dirt. "Tracks, discarded items, signs of how many people were really here." She wandered a short distance away, examining the side of the road where passengers might have fled during the attack. A glint of metal caught her eye, and she bent to pick up a small object half buried in the dirt. "Mr. Morgan," she called, holding up her find. "I think I found something." Rhett joined her quickly, taking the small metal button she offered. It was distinctive silver with an intricate pattern of intertwined snakes. "Do you recognize it?" she asked. His expression was grim. "Yes, it's from a custom vest that Green Hargrove wears for poker games. I've seen it at the Silverbuck when he plays." "Then he was here," Josephine breathed. "He was involved in the robbery directly, not just planning it." "It would seem so." Rhett pocketed the button. "But this alone isn't enough to prove anything. We need more." They continued their search, finding little else of value until Rhett noticed something unusual about the tracks leading away from the scene. "These hoofprints," he said, pointing to marks in the dirt. "4 horses, heavily laden, heading south." But the sheriff's report said the robbers went north toward the mountains. "Could the sheriff have been mistaken?" Josephine asked, coming to stand beside him, Rhett's mouth set in a hard line. "Dawson isn't incompetent, just corrupt. He deliberately misled the posse to protect whoever did this." "So Dawson is working with Green," Josephine concluded. "That explains why he was so quick to arrest me." "Follow these tracks with me," Rhett said, swinging back onto his horse. "Let's see where they lead." They followed the trail southward for nearly 2 miles until it veered sharply east toward a cluster of abandoned mining shacks that dotted a hillside. As they approached cautiously, Rhett held up a hand for Josephine to stop. "Someone's there," he whispered, nodding toward the largest shack. Smoke rose faintly from its crooked chimney. They dismounted and tethered their horses out of sight, then crept closer on foot. Rhett drew his revolver, checking that it was loaded. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his voice barely audible. As they neared the shack, voices became audible, men arguing heatedly inside. "You said this would be clean," one voice complained. "Now we've got that cowboy sticking his nose in, and the Fletcher woman is still walking free." "Calm yourself, Edwards," replied a second voice, smoother, more educated. Josephine felt a chill as she recognized Samuel Green's distinctive tones. "Morgan is a minor inconvenience. As for the woman, she'll be dealt with soon enough, like we dealt with her brother." A third voice, followed by harsh laughter. Josephine stiffened beside Rhett, who placed a restraining hand on her arm. She was trembling, whether from fear or rage, he couldn't tell. "Precisely," Green answered. "James Fletcher was unfortunate enough to recognize me from St. Louis. His sister will meet a similar end, along with her cowboy protector." "When?" the first voice demanded. "Tonight," Green said definitively. "I've arranged everything with Dawson. The woman will be recaptured for attempting to flee, and Morgan will be shot resisting arrest if he interferes. By morning, our problems will be solved." Rhett pulled Josephine back from the shack, retreating silently until they were safely out of earshot. "We have to get back to town," he said urgently. "We need to be gone before Dawson comes for you." "But we heard them confess," Josephine protested. "Green admitted to killing James. We need to tell someone who would believe us. Green owns half the town and Dawson controls the other half." Rhett's expression was grim. "Our only chance is to find solid proof and get it to the federal marshal in Silver Creek. He's beyond Green's influence." They hurried back to their horses, mounting quickly. As they prepared to ride, the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the direction of town froze them in place. "Too late," Rhett muttered, drawing his gun. "They must have followed our trail from town." 4 riders appeared on the ridge above them, Dawson and 3 deputies, all armed. The marshal's face twisted into a cold smile when he spotted them. "Well, well," he called down. "Looks like I was right about you trying to run, Miss Fletcher, and Morgan aiding a fugitive. That's a serious offense. The only criminals here are you and Green," Rhett replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "We know about the stagecoach robbery. We know about James Fletcher." Dawson's smile faltered slightly. "Don't know what you're talking about, Cowboy. But I do know I've got a fugitive to take in and a man interfering with justice." "Is that what you call it? Justice?" Rhett's gun remained steady in his hand, but he hadn't raised it yet. 4 against 1 were poor odds, especially with Josephine to protect. "Call it whatever you want," Dawson shrugged. "Won't matter much to either of you by sundown." He nodded to his deputies. "Take them." What happened next unfolded in a blur of motion and sound. As the deputies spurred their horses forward, Rhett fired a warning shot into the air, then grabbed Josephine's reins. "Ride," he shouted, and they took off in opposite directions, splitting the pursuers. 2 deputies followed Josephine while Dawson and the 3rd went after Rhett. Josephine bent low over her horse's neck, urging the bay mare to greater speed as bullets whizzed past her. The mare responded gamely, its powerful legs eating up the distance as they thundered across an open meadow toward a distant tree line. Behind her, one of the deputies was gaining a young man named Collins who rode like he'd been born in the saddle. Josephine had seen him at the Silverbuck, watching her play piano with eyes that held more intelligence than he let on. Now those eyes were determined as he closed the gap between them. She reached the trees just seconds before him, ducking low to avoid branches as the mare picked its way through the underbrush. A shout told her that Collins had followed, while the 2nd deputy had either fallen behind or chosen another route to cut her off. Josephine had no plan beyond escape, no destination except away from Dawson and his men. But as she emerged from the trees onto a narrow ridge overlooking a steep ravine, she realized her path had narrowed to a dangerous choice: stop and surrender, or risk the treacherous descent. The decision was made for her when Collins burst from the trees behind her, his gun raised. "Stop right there, Miss Fletcher," he called. "Don't make this worse than it already is." Josephine pulled her horse to a halt at the edge of the ravine, breathing hard as she turned to face the young deputy. "Mr. Collins, you know I didn't rob that stagecoach. You were at the Silverbuck that day, watching me play piano the entire afternoon." Collins hesitated, his gun wavering slightly. That's not what the marshal says." "The marshal is working with Samuel Green," she pressed, seeing the uncertainty in his eyes. "They're the ones who robbed the stagecoach. They killed my brother." "You must have suspected something wasn't right about Dawson's story." "I can't go against the marshal," Collins said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Even if he's a murderer," Josephine challenged. "Even if innocent people die," the young deputy's internal struggle was visible on his face. Finally, he lowered his gun slightly. "Miss Fletcher, I don't know what's true anymore, but something's not right in Redemption Creek. Hasn't been since Green arrived." Hope flared in Josephine's chest. "Then help us expose them." "My friend Morgan and I found evidence." A gunshot cracked through the air, and Collins jerked forward, a look of surprise crossing his face as a dark stain spread across his chest. He toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the ground. The 2nd deputy emerged from the trees, his smoking gun still raised. "Traitor," he spat at Collins's body before turning the weapon toward Josephine. "Now for you, Miss Fletcher." In that terrifying moment, Josephine made her choice. She yanked her horse around and urged it over the edge of the ravine, down a slope so steep it seemed impossible to navigate. The mare scrambled and slid, stones tumbling beneath its hooves as Josephine clung desperately to its mane. Behind her, the deputy cursed and fired, the bullet striking a tree beside her as the angle of the slope took her out of his line of sight. The descent was harrowing. Several times Josephine was certain they would fall, but the mare somehow kept its footing, half sliding, half leaping down the incline until they reached the bottom. Josephine didn't pause to celebrate their survival. She urged the exhausted horse forward, following the ravine away from where the deputy might be watching from above. She needed to find Rhett to warn him that the deputies were shooting to kill. But Redemption Creek lay in the opposite direction, and she had no idea where he might have fled. As the shadows lengthened across the landscape, Josephine faced the growing realization that she was alone in unfamiliar territory, pursued by men who wanted her dead, with night rapidly approaching. The brave front she had maintained began to crack, tears stinging her eyes as the enormity of her situation crashed over her. Yet even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Josephine Fletcher straightened her spine and wiped away her tears. Her brother had been murdered. An innocent deputy had died trying to help her. And somewhere out there, a cowboy who had risked everything to protect her was fighting his own battle against the same enemies. She would not give up. She would find Rhett Morgan, and together they would expose Green and Dawson for what they truly were. What Josephine didn't know was that Rhett was engaged in his own desperate struggle, bleeding from a bullet graze across his ribs as he and Dawson faced each other in a remote clearing, guns drawn in a standoff that only one man would walk away from. "It ends here, Morgan," Dawson was saying, his eyes cold as winter. "You should have minded your own business." Rhett's grip on his revolver remained steady despite the pain in his side. "Protecting innocent people from scum like you and Green is my business." Dawson laughed a harsh, ugly sound. "There's no such thing as innocent people, just those who haven't been caught yet." His expression hardened. "Your woman's already dead by now. Collins and Richards had their orders." Something dark and dangerous flashed in Rhett's eyes at these words. "If they've harmed her, what I'm about to do to you will seem merciful compared to what awaits Green." "Big talk from a dead man," Dawson sneered and raised his gun to fire. Rhett had spent 3 years hunting a ghost, honing his skills and his instincts in preparation for a moment of justice that had consumed his every waking thought. Those years of single-minded purpose served him now as he dropped to one knee and fired in a single fluid motion, his bullet finding its mark even as Dawson's shot whistled harmlessly overhead. The marshal staggered backward, shock registering on his face as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. His gun slipped from nerveless fingers as he collapsed to his knees. "You can't stop him," Dawson gasped as Rhett approached, his own gun still trained on the dying man. "Green has too much power, too many friends, not for long," Rhett replied grimly, Dawson's lips twisted in a bloody smile. "You think this is just about money, Green's planning, something bigger, the silver mine, government contracts." His voice weakened. "You have no idea." "Tell me," Rhett demanded, kneeling beside the marshal despite the pain in his side. But Dawson's eyes were already glazing over, whatever secrets he held dying with him as his last breath rattled in his chest. Rhett searched the marshal's body, finding nothing but a pocket watch, some coins, and a folded document that appeared to be a deed to a silver mine signed over to Samuel Green just 3 days earlier. The same day as the stagecoach robbery. Getting to his feet with a grimace of pain, Rhett mounted his horse and headed in the direction he had last seen Josephine flee. The sun was setting, painting the landscape in blood-red hues that seemed all too fitting for the day's events. He had to find her before nightfall, before Green's men did. What neither Rhett nor Josephine realized was that their separate paths were leading them toward the same destination, a fate that would bind them together more tightly than either could have imagined when they first met on that dusty street in Redemption Creek. As darkness fell across the land, Josephine found herself following the ravine as it gradually widened into a small valley. Her horse was tiring, its steps becoming increasingly labored, and she knew they would need to stop soon. The temperature was dropping rapidly, a common occurrence in the high desert once the sun disappeared. In the distance, she spotted a faint glow, a campfire perhaps, or a lamp in a window. Approaching cautiously, she discovered a small cabin nestled against a rocky hillside, smoke curling from its chimney. A single horse was tethered outside. Josephine hesitated, weighing her options. The cabin might belong to one of Green's men, but it might also be a miner or hunter who could help her. The growing cold and her exhaustion made the decision for her she would risk approaching. As she neared the cabin, the door suddenly swung open and a tall figure stepped out, gun drawn. Josephine gasped in recognition. Rhett, he lowered his weapon immediately, relief washing over his features. Josephine, thank God. She dismounted quickly, nearly stumbling as her legs, stiff from hours of riding, struggled to support her. Rhett crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides, catching her arm to steady her. Are you hurt? He asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. No, I'm fine, she assured him, then noticed the dark stain on his shirt. But you're wounded. It's just a graze, he dismissed, though his face was pale in the fading light. Come inside. This place appears abandoned, but it's shelter for the night. The cabin was indeed deserted, though not for long. Dust covered every surface, but a woodpile remained stacked beside the small iron stove, and the roof was intact. Rhett had already started a small fire in the stove, providing warmth and light to the single-room dwelling. What happened? Josephine asked as she helped him remove his duster to better examine his wound. The deputies separated us. One of them, Collins, I think he was going to help us, but the other shot him. Rhett's expression darkened as he eased onto a rickety chair. Dawson caught up to me. He won't be a problem anymore. The grim finality in his voice told Josephine everything she needed to know. And the other deputy? No sign of him. He might have gone back to town, or he could still be out there looking for us. Rhett winced as Josephine began cleaning his wound with water from a canteen and strips torn from her petticoat. We'll need to be careful. I found something before I fled, Josephine said, working gently to bandage his ribs. Collins confirmed that I was playing piano during the robbery. He was there at the Silverbuck that day. He saw me. Rhett nodded. That corroborates what we already knew, but with Collins dead, his testimony died with him, Josephine finished sadly. What about you? Did you learn anything from Dawson? Rhett produced the deed he'd taken from the marshal's body. This might be significant. It's a deed to the Silver Star mine, signed over to Green 3 days ago, the same day as the robbery. Josephine's brow furrowed as she examined the document. The Silver Star. That's the mine my brother wrote about in his last letter. He said it was his ticket to wealth, that he'd discovered something valuable there. Something worth killing for, apparently, Rhett said grimly. Dawson mentioned government contracts before he died. Said Green was planning something bigger than just robbery and fraud. What could be so valuable about an old silver mine? Josephine wondered aloud. I don't know, but I intend to find out. Rhett's eyes met hers, something unspoken passing between them. First, though, we need to rest. Tomorrow will be dangerous. As they settled in for the night, Rhett taking the only bed despite Josephine's protests while she made a pallet near the stove, a strange intimacy developed between them, 2 souls thrown together by circumstance, united by loss and a common enemy. Why did you really help me that day in town? Josephine asked softly as the fire's glow cast dancing shadows on the cabin walls. The truth this time. Rhett was quiet for so long she thought he might have fallen asleep. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and reflective. I recognized something in you, he admitted. A determination I've seen in my own eyes every morning since I lost Rebecca and Emma. You weren't beaten despite the chains and the charges against you. There was fire there, not defeat. He paused. And perhaps I was tired of watching innocent people suffer while men like Green prosper. What will you do if we succeed? She asked. After Green faces justice, another long silence. I don't know, he confessed. For 3 years, vengeance has been my only purpose. I never thought beyond it. And now, Rhett shifted in the darkness. Now I'm starting to wonder if there might be something after vengeance worth living for. The words hung in the air between them, laden with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Josephine felt her heart quicken, surprised by the depth of emotion this near stranger had awakened in her. "We should sleep," Rhett said finally. "Dawn comes early." But sleep was elusive for both of them that night, each lost in thoughts of what the future might hold if they survived the coming day. Morning arrived with a clarity that seemed at odds with the danger they faced. The air was crisp and clean, the sky a flawless blue that stretched endlessly over the rugged landscape. Rhett and Josephine prepared to leave at first light, knowing that Green's men would be searching for them. "The Silver Star mine is about 10 miles northeast of here," Rhett said as they mounted their horses. "If we're going to find answers, that's where they'll be." Josephine nodded, determination evident in the set of her jaw. "Then that's where we're going." They rode through the morning, taking a circuitous route that kept them away from main trails and open areas where they might be spotted. Rhett's wound troubled him, though he tried to hide it, and Josephine noticed the occasional grimace of pain that crossed his face when he thought she wasn't looking. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking the Silver Star mine. The operation was larger than Josephine had expected. Several buildings clustered around the mine entrance, wagons loaded with ore, and at least a dozen men working the site. "That's strange," Rhett murmured as they observed from their hidden vantage point. "Dawson told everyone the Silver Star was played out years ago. Why keep it running if there's no silver left?" "Unless it's not silver they're mining," Josephine suggested. They watched for another hour, noting the armed guards patrolling the perimeter, unusual for a simple mining operation. Then, as a wagon departed loaded with sealed crates rather than raw ore, Rhett made his decision. "We need to get inside that mine," he said. "Whatever secret Green is protecting, it's down there." "How do we get past the guards?" Josephine asked. Rhett pointed to a supply wagon approaching the mine from the opposite direction. "We wait until dark, then we use that." Night fell slowly, each minute stretching as they waited for their opportunity. When darkness finally blanketed the landscape, they moved silently toward the rear of the mine property where supplies were delivered. "Stay close," Rhett whispered as they crept past a dozing guard. "If we're separated, meet back at the cabin." They slipped into a storage shed, finding it filled with mining equipment, lanterns, and most surprisingly boxes of dynamite. "That's enough blasting powder to collapse half the mountain," Rhett observed, examining the crates with concern. "Why would they need so much?" Josephine wondered. Before Rhett could answer, voices approached outside. They ducked behind the crates as the door swung open and 2 men entered, one of them unmistakably Samuel Green. "The shipment must leave tomorrow," Green was saying to his companion. "The government inspectors arrive in 3 days. By then, all evidence must be gone." "What about Morgan and the Fletcher woman?" the other man asked. Green's laugh was cold. "Richards is still searching for them, but it hardly matters now. By this time tomorrow, Redemption Creek will be just another ghost town and we'll be rich men." "Seems a waste," the companion remarked. "All those people. Collateral damage," Green dismissed callously. "The uranium deposits alone are worth millions. The government will pay anything to keep it out of foreign hands, especially with the tensions in Europe." Uranium. The word meant little to Josephine, but Rhett stiffened beside her. He'd read about the rare mineral in a scientific journal, its potential value for new types of weapons, its dangerous properties. "Once we've extracted the last of it and destroyed the evidence of what was really here, the Silver Star will become exactly what everyone thought it was: a failed silver mine, tragically collapsed with all its workers inside." Green's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather rather than mass murder. "And the town?" his companion asked. "An unfortunate accident. Mining towns suffer catastrophes all the time. No one will question it too deeply, especially with no survivors to tell tales." The men left, taking a lantern with them and plunging the shed back into darkness. Josephine turned to Rhett, horror evident even in the dim light filtering through cracks in the walls. "He's planning to kill everyone in Redemption Creek," she whispered, her voice shaking. "All those people misses. Brewster, Jacob from the stable, everyone." Rhett's face was set in grim lines. "We have to stop him, and we need proof of what he's doing here to send to the federal authorities." They waited until the area was clear before slipping out of the shed and toward the mine entrance. A single guard stood watch, but he was more interested in the flask in his pocket than in potential intruders. Rhett approached silently from behind, striking the man with the butt of his revolver and lowering him quietly to the ground. "He'll live," Rhett assured Josephine as he took the guard's lantern, "but he'll have quite a headache when he wakes." The mine tunnel was damp and cold, the air growing thicker as they descended. Their lantern cast eerie shadows on rough-hewn walls supported by timber braces that creaked ominously under the weight of the mountain above. "James must have discovered the uranium," Josephine said as they moved deeper into the earth. "That's why Green killed him. And now he's planning to sell it to the highest bidder after convincing the government it's all been destroyed," Rhett added. "Clever and ruthless." They followed the main tunnel until it branched into 3 separate passages. Choosing the one that showed signs of recent activity, fresh boot prints in the mud, newer timber supports, they continued downward. The passage eventually opened into a larger chamber where several miners were working with picks and shovels, extracting a strange, dark ore from the rock face. None noticed Rhett and Josephine observing from the shadows of the tunnel. "There's our proof," Rhett whispered, gesturing to a stack of wooden crates stamped with government seals. "Those crates are military. My brother worked in a weapons factory during the war. That's how Green is shipping the uranium." Josephine was about to respond when a voice behind them made both freeze. "I thought you might find your way here eventually." They turned to find Samuel Green standing just feet away, a revolver pointed steadily at them. Behind him, Richards, the deputy who had shot Collins, blocked the tunnel with his own weapon drawn. "Mr. Morgan," Green continued conversationally, "you've been a persistent thorn in my side for longer than you realize. I recognized you the moment you rode into Redemption Creek, though you clearly didn't recognize me. I've changed quite a bit since Denver." Rhett's face hardened as he finally saw past the refined banker's appearance to the man who had destroyed his family. "Smith." "Among other names," Green acknowledged with a slight bow. "Though I've grown rather fond of Samuel Green, it has a certain gravitas that Edward Smith lacked." "You're a murderer," Josephine spat. "You killed my brother," Green sighed dramatically. "James Fletcher was an unfortunate necessity. He stumbled upon my operation here and recognized me from St. Louis. I couldn't allow that." "Just like you couldn't allow those people in Denver to keep their life savings," Rhett said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Just like you're planning to sacrifice an entire town to cover your tracks." "Business," Green shrugged. "Nothing personal, I assure you. Though in your case, Mr. Morgan, eliminating you will bring me a certain satisfaction. You've been remarkably persistent." "What are you going to do with us?" Josephine demanded, her mind racing for a way out of their predicament. Green smiled coldly. "Why, you're going to be the tragic victims of a mine accident, the first of many in Redemption Creek, I'm afraid," he gestured to Richards. "Tie them up and set the charges. Make sure they're deep enough that no one will find the bodies." As Richards stepped forward with a length of rope, Rhett tensed, ready to fight despite the guns trained on them. But Josephine placed a restraining hand on his arm, her eyes communicating a silent message: wait. Richards bound their hands roughly, shoving them deeper into the mine while Green watched with evident satisfaction. "I'd stay to witness your end," Green told them as Richards positioned them against a support beam, "but I have a shipment to oversee. By this time tomorrow, I'll be on a train east with enough money to start a new life yet again." He checked his pocket watch. "You have approximately 20 minutes before the charges detonate. I suggest you make peace with whatever deity you believe in." With that, he and Richards departed, leaving Rhett and Josephine alone in the flickering lantern light. The ominous ticking of dynamite fuses their only companion. The moment the footsteps faded, Josephine twisted against her bonds. Rhett, I can reach the knife in my boot if you can turn around. Rhett looked at her in surprise. You have a knife. A lady in the West learns to be prepared, she replied with determination. James taught me that much before he disappeared. Working together awkwardly, Josephine managed to extract a small blade from a hidden sheath in her boot. With painstaking precision, she began sawing at the ropes binding Rhett's wrists. Even if we get free, Rhett said, keeping his voice low, we still need to stop those explosives and warn the town. One impossible task at a time, Josephine responded, her voice strained with effort. First, we escape, then we save Redemption Creek. The rope finally gave way, and Rhett quickly untied Josephine. They could hear the faint hiss of multiple fuses burning somewhere in the darkness beyond their lantern's glow. This way, Rhett urged, grabbing the lantern and leading her deeper into the mine rather than toward the exit. Shouldn't we be going out? Josephine questioned, following nonetheless. They'll have men watching the entrance, Rhett explained. And we need to find those charges before they blow this whole mountain apart. They hurried through the twisting passages, following the sound of the fuses until they reached a small chamber where several bundles of dynamite had been placed strategically around key support beams. If these go, the entire mine collapses, Rhett said grimly, examining the nearest bundle. The fuses were burning steadily, already half consumed. Help me gather them. Working frantically, they collected the dynamite bundles, carefully pinching out fuses as they went. Sweat beaded on Rhett's forehead despite the cool air, his wound aching with each movement. That should be all of them, he said finally, setting the diffused explosives in a pile. Now we need to get out of here and warn the town. Wait, Josephine said, her eyes fixed on something in the rock wall. Look at this. Embedded in the stone was a vein of dark, metallic ore uranium, presumably, but beside it was something else. A small leather notebook wedged into a crevice. Josephine pulled it free, her hands trembling slightly as she recognized the handwriting inside. This is James's journal, she whispered. He must have hidden it here before. She couldn't finish the sentence. We'll take it with us, Rhett said gently. It might contain the evidence we need. They made their way back through the mine, avoiding the main tunnel, and instead following a narrow air shaft that Rhett had noticed during their frantic search for the explosives. The shaft was tight and nearly vertical in places, requiring all their strength to climb, but eventually opened onto a hillside some distance from the mine entrance. Night still cloaked the landscape as they emerged, gasping for fresh air, their clothes torn and dirty from the difficult ascent. Green said the shipment leaves tomorrow, Josephine said as they caught their breath. That means we have until morning to stop him and evacuate the town. Rhett nodded, his expression resolute. First, we need to find a horse, then we ride for Redemption Creek. They moved stealthily through the darkness toward the corral where the miners' horses were kept. The compound was still active despite the late hour, with men loading crates onto wagons under Green's supervision. Avoiding the guards, they managed to untether 2 horses from the far side of the corral. As they prepared to mount, a shout went up from the mine entrance. The prisoners are gone, and the charges have been disarmed. Time to ride, Rhett said, helping Josephine onto her horse before swinging into his own saddle. Stay low and follow me. They galloped away from the mine, bullets whistling past them as guards opened fire. Rhett led them on a zigzagging path through the trees, making pursuit difficult in the darkness. By the time they reached the main trail to Redemption Creek, the sounds of pursuit had faded. We need to split up, Rhett decided as they paused to rest the horses. I'll go back to town and start evacuating people. You take James's journal and the evidence we've gathered to Silver Creek. Find Federal Marshal Jenkins, he's a good man. Tell him everything. No, Josephine said firmly. I'm not leaving you to face Green alone. We do this together. Rhett looked at her for a long moment, something powerful and unspoken passing between them. Then he nodded slowly. Together then, but we need to hurry. Green won't wait once he knows we've escaped. They rode hard through the night, pushing their horses to the limit. As the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern horizon, the buildings of Redemption Creek came into view peaceful and unaware of the danger approaching. Their arrival caused an immediate stir. Disheveled, wounded, and believed to be fugitives, their appearance in the main street drew stares and whispers from early risers. "Listen to me," Rhett called out, his voice carrying across the awakening town. "Everyone needs to evacuate immediately. Samuel Green is planning to destroy this town and everyone in it." Most regarded him with skepticism or outright disbelief, but Mrs. Brewster emerged from her hotel with a shotgun cradled in her arms. "What's this about Green?" she demanded, her sharp eyes taking in their condition. Quickly, Rhett explained what they had discovered: the uranium mine, the planned accident, the impending destruction. As he spoke, a small crowd gathered, their expressions shifting from doubt to concern. "Green's been acting strange lately," confirmed the blacksmith. "Paid me triple to rush some special metal work for those crates he's been shipping out. And Dawson's men have been turning folks away from the North Ridge Trail," added another townsperson. "Said it was unsafe, but there weren't nothing wrong with it last month." Jacob, the stable boy, pushed through the crowd. "I believe them. Miss Fletcher ain't no killer, and Mr. Morgan's been straight with me." Josephine held up James's journal. "My brother documented everything before Green murdered him. The uranium, the government contracts, the plan to destroy evidence by collapsing the mine with workers inside." A murmur ran through the gathering crowd. Mrs. Brewster's expression hardened. "I never did trust that smooth-talking banker. Always thought he was too perfect by half." "We need to evacuate everyone," Rhett insisted. "Green could be on his way here right now." As if summoned by his words, the thunder of approaching hooves reached their ears. Around the bend in the main street came a wagon driven by Samuel Green himself, flanked by Richards and several armed miners. Behind them, more wagons followed, loaded not with ore, but with explosives. Green pulled his wagon to a halt when he saw the gathering in the street. His usual polished demeanor showed cracks of rage as he spotted Rhett and Josephine. "It seems I've underestimated you both," he called, his refined voice carrying a deadly edge. "But it changes nothing. Redemption Creek has outlived its usefulness." "It's over, Green," Rhett replied, stepping forward with his gun drawn. "These people know the truth, about the uranium, about James Fletcher, about Denver, everything." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Green's face as he glanced at the growing crowd of townspeople, many of whom were now armed and looking decidedly unfriendly. "You're bluffing," Green said, but his voice lacked conviction. "These people won't believe a wanted murderer and a drifter over a respected businessman." "Actually," came a new voice from the edge of town, "they might believe a federal marshal." All eyes turned to see a dust-covered rider approaching a tall man wearing a marshal's badge. Behind him rode a dozen armed men bearing federal insignia. "Marshal Jenkins," Rhett acknowledged with visible relief. "You got my telegram. Arrived in Silver Creek last night," Jenkins confirmed, dismounting. "Figured I'd better ride out immediately given what you wrote." He turned his attention to Green. "Samuel Green, or should I say Clayton Hargrove, Edward Smith, William Peters, you're wanted in 4 states for fraud, theft, and murder." Green's composure crumbled entirely. With a snarl of rage, he drew a concealed derringer and aimed it directly at Josephine. "If I'm going to hang, I'll at least have the satisfaction of..." His words were cut short by the crack of Rhett's revolver. Green staggered, the small pistol falling from his grasp as he clutched his chest. He looked almost surprised as he collapsed to the ground. "That was for Rebecca and Emma," Rhett said quietly as he lowered his smoking gun. "And for James Fletcher, and for everyone else whose lives you destroyed." Richards and the other men with Green surrendered without resistance, clearly recognizing that their employer's protection had ended with his life. In the days that followed, Redemption Creek experienced a transformation. The uranium mine was properly secured by government agents. The truth about James Fletcher's murder and the stagecoach robbery came to light, clearing Josephine's name completely. Marshal Jenkins recommended Rhett for a commendation from the federal government for exposing the illegal uranium operation. Through it all, Rhett and Josephine remained inseparable, their shared ordeal having forged a bond neither could fully explain but neither wished to break. One evening, a week after Green's death, they stood together on the porch of Mrs. Brewster's hotel, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Marshal Jenkins offered me a deputy position," Rhett said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Said they could use a man with my skills in Silver Creek." Josephine turned to study his profile, noting how the tension that had marked his features when they first met had softened. "Are you going to accept?" "I'm considering it," he admitted. "For the first time in 3 years, I'm thinking about the future instead of the past." He paused, turning to face her. "But I find I'm not eager to leave Redemption Creek just yet." "Oh," Josephine's heart quickened at the way he was looking at her, as if she were something precious he'd discovered unexpectedly. "There's something keeping me here," Rhett continued, taking a step closer. "Someone, actually," Josephine smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. "And what about this? Someone, does she have plans to stay in Redemption Creek?" "I don't know," Rhett answered, his voice softening as he took her hand in his. "I haven't asked her yet." "Perhaps you should," Josephine suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "Josephine Fletcher," Rhett said, his storm-gray eyes holding hers, "when I first saw you in chains on that street, I said you belonged beside me. I meant it then as a way to save you, but now—" He took a deep breath. "Now I find myself hoping you might stay beside me for reasons that have nothing to do with danger or enemies." Josephine reached up to touch his cheek gently. "They said I belonged in chains. You said I belonged beside you. It seems to me that's exactly where I'm meant to be." When their lips met, it was like coming home after a long, difficult journey, tender yet passionate, filled with promise and the healing of old wounds. As they stood together in the fading light, the chains of their pasts finally broke away completely, leaving only the future stretching before them, a future they would face side by side. 2 years later, Rhett Morgan stood on the porch of a comfortable ranch house on the outskirts of Redemption Creek, watching his wife hang laundry in the yard. The silver deputy's badge on his chest caught the sunlight as he smiled at the domestic scene before him. Josephine looked up, sensing his gaze, and returned his smile, the same smile that had captivated him from the first moment they'd truly spoken. Her free hand rested protectively on the gentle swell of her stomach, where their first child grew. With James's journal and the government reward for exposing Green's operation, they had purchased land and built a life together, a life neither had dared to imagine when they first met on that fateful day when a cowboy declared that a woman in chains belonged beside him instead. Redemption Creek had lived up to its name, offering both of them a second chance. The town had grown, prospering from legitimate silver mining operations that had been discovered after the uranium excavation ceased. Mrs. Brewster still ran the hotel with an iron fist. Jacob, no longer a boy, had become Rhett's unofficial deputy, learning the law enforcement trade. As Josephine finished hanging the last of the laundry, she made her way to the porch where Rhett waited, slipping naturally into his embrace. "Any word from Marshal Jenkins?" she asked, noting the letter in his pocket. "The last of Green's associates has been convicted," Rhett confirmed. "It's truly over now." Josephine rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you ever think about how strangely our story began? How unlikely it all was?" Rhett's arms tightened around her. "I think some stories are written long before we understand them. The moment I saw you, something inside me knew, even if my head hadn't caught up yet." "They said I belonged in chains," Josephine mused, looking up at him with eyes full of love. "How wrong they were." "I was the only one who got it right," Rhett said with a smile, bending to kiss her softly. "You belonged beside me, you always will." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, bathing their home in golden light, they stood together on the porch, no longer a woman accused and a man consumed by vengeance, but partners in every sense of the word. The chains that had once threatened to define Josephine's fate had instead led her to freedom and love in the arms of a cowboy, brave enough to stand against an entire town for what he believed was right. In the Wild West, where justice often came from the barrel of a gun and second chances were rare. They had found something precious and enduring, a love that had begun with an act of courage and grown into a bond that neither time nor hardship could break. And as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, Rhett and Josephine Morgan entered their home hand in hand, leaving behind the ghosts of their pasts and embracing the promise of their future together, just as they were always meant to be.